Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Bechet, and this is the AAF Exchange, a podcast from the American Action Forum, where experts provide clear, data-driven insights into today's economic and domestic policy issues. Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. On this episode of the AAF Exchange, Biden's not-so-impressive regulatory milestone, Trump's costly 10% tariff proposal, and the state of the economy. Joining us to discuss all of this is Douglas Holtz-Eakin. Doug, thanks for joining us. It's been a while.
My pleasure. This is great. Great to be back.
I know travel and, life has put us on hiatus for a little while, but we're back and we're ready to discuss everything. So tell us what's been on your mind.
Today's source of rage is Freddie Mac's proposal to the FHFA that it be able to issue second lien mortgages on those mortgages where it's already holding the first mortgage. And I think this is an incredibly bad idea. It just feels just like the bad old days where Fannie and Freddie ran amok and they really didn't stick to their mission and ended up endangering everybody and then put in conservatorship, and they've been there ever since. So, why is this a bad idea? So the whole point of this is to allow people to take out what would be a 20-year fixed rate mortgage against the equity in their house. So they're going to get to get the cash out when they've got, say, $100,000 of equity in their house. That has nothing to do with housing. In fact, the one thing you cannot do with the money is buy a house. It's all about consumer lending, and then they can go buy cars and whatever with it. But, it's not their mission. And so, strike one. I think that's a terrible idea. Strike two, sort of the equity issue. Who does this? It's going to be people with good credit, a lot of equity. So these are affluent people. These aren't sort of marginal folks. So this is a proposal that's going to worsen the inequality that supposedly the administration cares so much about. So strike two, don't do that. Is this something that is needed out there because the marketplace can't provide it? No, there are millions of private lenders out there who can give you a loan against the equity in your home, and home equity line of credits exist and are there, and so there's no market failure that the government needs to step in and fix. And for all practical purposes, Fannie and Freddie are agencies of the government right now. They are in conservatorship. So this flunks that test. So that's three strikes, and there are more. So this is a really bad at bat. There's no way. The other thing it would do is really threaten to repeat the American Rescue Plan inflationary stimulus, because this is a lot of money. The estimates are somewhere between $800 billion and $1.5 trillion could be made available by this. If we got $400-500 billion out in a year and just tossed it at the economy, that's a big demand stimulus. That's not something we need right now. And so this is the wrong time to be doing this. Another strike. And then lastly, when they take these risks, these are the best risks in the credit markets. And so they're going to take them off the banks and other lenders and put them into these second mortgages. What's going to be left is a much riskier book of business, a much more dangerous book of business for the private sector. So you're sort of shifting the balance of risk in the credit pool in a way that you just don't need to be doing. And that'd be fine if it was a trivial amount, but at $1.5 trillion, it would be about one half of all consumer lending. So that's a big shift in the risks. You take half the best half of the risk pool out. I just don't see how you can support this idea. I understand why Fannie and Freddie might want to do it. They will make a lot of money, but they should not be allowed to do it. Like the FHFA should just say, no, this is outside your mission, not okay. You're not going to do this. Other than that, I'm good with it. It's fine.
Doug, it was the anniversary of Kerry Wood's 20 strikeout game recently, I think last week. So I think you might have just tied him. All right. Well, you mentioned the economy, so let's talk about that. There's a lot going on with the economy. We got a lot of data in the past couple of weeks. Last week, we got the most recent read on the labor market. You wrote a dish, I think, on Monday about this, where you said, it's showing signs of cooling. What are your thoughts?
So let's roll back even a little bit further. First quarter GDP came out 1.6%. A lot of people were like, "Oh, that's really down from 3.2 in the fourth quarter." It's probably the best looking data I've seen in a while. It was a very balanced 1.6%. Both businesses and households were providing demand. It got depressed by trade and inventory fluctuations. Real sales to private sector entities, households, and businesses grew at a 3.1% annual rate. So that was a good solid report. And now we go to the latest employment report, and we come in at 175,000. People were expecting 75,000 more than that, and a lot of chatter about how this is the Fed succeeded in getting it to cool. And I said that on TV, and that was the obvious interpretation at first. I then went back and looked at the data on labor demand and labor supply, and trying to figure out what's going on. And there isn't any real evidence of a noticeable cooling of labor demand. You look at payroll components like the number of workers, the hours they're employing them, the average hourly earnings, all of that adds up to the continued high level of demand we've had. You look at the labor supply, you see a sharp drop off in the growth in the labor force in the first couple of months of this year. Didn't see that coming. Don't know where exactly it's coming from, but I think it's the immigration story again. They have really shut down the border crossings, and maybe starting to show up. But a reduction in labor supply is a very different way to get a fewer number of jobs than labor demand, because this means you're fighting over a smaller pool of workers. The pressure on wages and perhaps inflation is going to be higher. So I'm in a wait and see mode on how that all plays out. You never learn enough from 1 month of data, but now my antenna's on alert. So what happens today? We get the new employment insurance, and they jump by 22,000. Not the end of the world, but a bigger jump than we have seen in quite a while. So something's going on out there, and it's worth sort of trying to keep track of it.
Yeah. Speaking of in the wait and see game, probably the Fed is in that wait and see game
they
too.
Are. Yeah.
I mean. So, what are we still looking at a rate cut this year, or what's the likelihood in your mind?
I think it's diminishing rapidly. I mean, this economy has evolved the way that I don't think anyone really expected. I think some people are still holding out for a September rate cut before that's far enough in front of the election. I don't think I'd do it. I think they're going to go to Jackson Hole in August and explain to the world why they're on hold until after the election, and that'll be that. So I think they might get a rate cut late in the year, but I don't think before the election.
Yeah, so maybe after the November election, we see some movement there as we start looking at, the next administration, the next Congress, and all that stuff. All right, let's turn to another milestone, if you will. It's a not so good one. President Biden's regulatory milestone, for lack of a better word here. His administration has passed the $1 trillion mark for final rule costs. Just put that in perspective for us.
I can't. It's mind-boggling. It's So, we've talked a lot about the Obama years, 8 years, very active in regulations to fill out Dodd-Frank and the Affordable Care Act, and there were these big pieces of legislation, and they produced $890 billion of regulatory costs in 8 years. And I thought that was a lot, and that $100 billion a year in disguised tax increases will probably harm growth in the economy. The Biden administration did $870 billion in a week. Like that's just so hard to wrap my head around. And it's everything. The big ones are related to the climate stuff. So tailpipe rules that guarantee that people get out of gas-powered cars and things like that. But they're already at 1.3 trillion this far in his term. It's just hard to wrap your head around that. That's an enormous number, and it doesn't get much commentary in the mainstream discussions. But you can't do that and not have some impacts. I mean, there's no question about it, and you do have to worry a little bit about the way they're doing the sort of analysis to make all this stuff okay. Like, you have to do benefit cost regulatory impact analysis. And if you look at what they do when they do the tailpipe rule, they count as a benefit the reduced fuel consumption, so you don't have to pay for gas. That's a benefit of the rule. You have the same benefit if we had a rule that said you had to go back to horse and buggies. So I don't think anyone really thinks that's a good idea. That there's a cost there, which is the quality of the transportation services, and they're not in any way addressing that. So I think these things are unbalanced as well. I'm not thrilled with what we're seeing on the regulatory front.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because I know we've talked about this before. They changed the way they do the cost benefit. This was part of their whole day one approach to this.
In particular, they lowered the discount rate. So they're counting benefits further out. They'll be bigger in the present, and same is true of costs. But usually, costs are up front, benefits are further out. So that enables some of these rules. Just for the record, note that the 1.3 trillion doesn't all happen in 2021, 22, and 23. It includes stuff that's out there, but that's the same thing as saying we had a tax cuts and jobs act sunset. It raises taxes by 3.3 trillion. Yeah, over 10 years, but that gives you the scale of the activity. But this is a milestone. It's a milestone because the character of the analysis got changed to make the rulemaking's easier. They have been coming at a stunning rate, and some of them are huge. And there's a disguised one floating around out there that I'm not sure people are aware of. The California Air Resources Board wants to get rid of diesel locomotives, wants to have electric trains now. That just doesn't exist. Like, the technology doesn't exist, and for them to say you can't run a carbon-based train is just not going to work. But the EPA could grant them a waiver for this, and if they do, then we will have a de facto national standard, as California has done in the past, of sort of how locomotives have to work. And I can't figure out how they think we're going to do transportation if they have diesel locomotives off it and they want to take diesel trucks off the road. I mean, so how's it going to get there? We don't have these technologies.
I'm generally of the belief that, Congress probably should have a say in these things. And this bypasses all that. Like, if you want to have some of these standards, then you need to go through them.
Yeah, I think, we're going to see, this court case on whether you can defer to the agency's expertise, the so-called Chevron deference. The Supreme Court's going to rule on that in a couple of months. So, that could change the landscape completely. If they come down sharply that you have to go to Congress to get this permission, it's a different world.
Yeah. All right. Let's do your favorite part of the podcast, trivia. It's a budget question. It was in today's dish.
I don't read the dish. I write it.
All right.
Or particularly, I haven't read the dish. So this is genuinely isn't in my brain.
Yeah. Well, it was today's fact of the day. Over the next 75 years, Social Security will owe X trillion more than it is projected to take in.
24.5. 24.5. It's always 24.5.
Well, it's 24.8. So I'll let you
they're
have
wrong. My estimate is 24.5.
I mean, so I picked that one because it's kind of stunning. Like, it's just it's a reminder that we need to get this issue taken care of. It's not going away anytime soon. It's getting closer and closer to an inflection point.
Yes. We're 10 years out from trust fund exhaustion. As I try to emphasize to people who think it's okay, we have time. No. If you're 55, that means you don't know what you're going to get in Social Security. You can't plan your retirement. That's a terrible way to run a pension program. We need to fix it and fix it now. Yeah. It's as a service to people who need to plan their financial futures.
It would be nice if we have this presidential election going on, if, the candidates would even talk about this issue. It doesn't look like it's anywhere in the discourse at all right now. Hopefully, something happens to where we can get a conversation around it.
Yeah. Biden explicitly took it off the table in his State of the Union. Trump is now saying every place he can, he's not going to touch it. I think RFK wants to go after it, but he's got a brain worm, so who knows? I mean...
Man,
what are you going to do?
That was a funny tweet last night. I'll have to say that. All right, let's talk about one last issue from President Trump's proposal to impose a 10% tariff on all imported goods. How would this impact the average American consumer, particularly in terms of cost of living and purchasing power?
So, first of all, because I go through this with lots of reporters, tariffs are a tax. They are a tax on an imported good. So this is a proposal to raise $3 trillion taxes over the next 10 years. Now, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is, surprisingly enough, almost exactly the same size. It's 3.3 if you let it sunset. I don't understand how letting the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act sunset is unthinkable, and imposing the same size tax called a tariff is just fine. And if we imposed a $3 trillion tax, everyone would be like, wait a minute, who's paying that? Well, in this case, it's a tax on the goods that people have to buy, so they're paying it. It's going to raise the prices of those goods, maybe not in a sustained inflationary fashion, but just jump them up 10% or 8% if they don't pass it all through. That's noticeable, that's real, and people are not going to like that. I'm surprised at how little attention this proposal's got. It's a radical proposal. The economics of it are dramatic. He can't do it, is my understanding. I'm not a lawyer, but Congress has delegated to the executive some specific authorities, like you can have a national security declaration that allows you to impose tariffs on aluminum and steel. Trump did that. You can have a Section 301 delegation that says, okay, if there's unfair competition, we have to protect this industry. You can go through a process and the president can impose those tariffs. They haven't delegated him, hey, do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this one should have to go through Congress. I don't think that's how the candidate is thinking. I think he's thinking, I'm just going to do this.
Yeah. Interesting. But they claim it's just a one-time thing, Doug. It's just a one-time thing. It's just a one-time
thing you live with forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of one-time thing matters. The one-time thing that goes away, that's different.
Yeah, you compared it to the proposals over the summer where, that's how we got inflation in the first place.
Oh, the American Rescue Plan.
American Rescue Plan, yes.
Yeah. So, we need to be cognizant that I think a better way to say it is this. I don't think we should be using budgetary instruments, taxes, spending, for near-term economic purposes. I think we need to set those to get better long-term growth and let the Fed deal with the near-term business cycles, inflation bursts, stuff like that. They are well-positioned to do it. They're capable of doing it, and we should just stay out of their business and certainly don't make it harder.
You've argued we have two candidates essentially imposing or promising to impose massive tax hikes to the American public, but just under different names. How should people think about this?
They should think through the actual proposals and whether they're a good idea, especially right now. I mean, I know that Trump wants to appeal to, I'm protecting you against evil foreigners, especially the Chinese. Biden has played the same card. Look past that to okay, this is an economy that is largely self-reliant. We're still not like some small European country that lives on international trade. The bulk of our activity is in the United States, trade in the United States, and these proposals damage that economy. I don't understand why we would accept them so easily.
Mm-hmm. Well, Doug, thank you for joining us and talking about all this stuff. I'm sure we'll have many more podcasts about this election going forward and the proposals that are being talked about.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Tune back in for our next episode, where our experts will provide clear, data-driven insights into today's economic and domestic issues. I'd also encourage you to check out any of the links in our show notes, and also follow us on social media to learn more about AAF. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play.